Hi guys, I hope you guys are doing well. So today I'm going to be covering the reading comprehension part of the admission test. Now I've divided this topic into three documents. So this is part one. Part one covers half of the topic. Part two will cover the remaining part of the topic, and part three will have practice questions. Okay, so make sure you check out all three parts when they are uploaded. So there are many different types of questions that you can face in the reading comprehension section. I've covered about five of them in this part and about 5 to 6 of them in the next one. So let's start with the first one. The first kind of question that can come in the reading comprehension section is on the author's purpose or the purpose of the passage. Okay, so the question will simply be stated as the purpose of the passage is dot dot dot, and there will be four options and you have to select one option. Okay, so now what this means is that they're trying to ask you what the author's purpose was when he was writing this passage, or why was this passage written, or what is this passage trying to get across, right? So there are many different purposes of a passage. So the three main purposes of a passage are to persuade, inform, and entertain. Okay, so these are the three main categories, and the others, when we study them, you will realize that they sort of just fall within these three categories. Okay, so the main three categories are persuade, inform, and entertain. So let's look at the first one, which is persuade. When a text is written to persuade, it will aim to convince the reader of the merits of a certain point of view. With this type of writing, the author will attempt to persuade the reader to agree with this point of view and or subsequently take a particular course of action. Okay, so what does persuade mean? Persuade means to convince someone to believe in something, or convince someone to follow something, or convince someone to buy something or consume something, right? That's what persuasion means. When you want to basically convince someone to do something, or to believe in something, or to believe in an idea. So that's what persuasion means. Okay, for example, advertisements and debates. Anything that persuades you to donate to an organization, stand up for a cause, vote for a specific person, believe in a certain idea, or buy a certain product. Okay, so that's what a persuasive passage will look like. Now, then another name for this is argumentative passage. Okay, now what is an argumentative passage? An argumentative passage will basically argue for something, right? So again, it's the same thing. It will basically be persuading you to believe in something by presenting the good points of that specific thing, right? So for example, if there's a passage persuading you to have breakfast in the morning, right? So what is the passage going to do? It's going to highlight the benefits of having breakfast in the morning, right? So that can be labeled as a persuasive passage or an argumentative passage. Okay, both of them are the same. But because the main goal of both of them is to basically persuade you or convince you, right? So you can tell when you are reading a passage, it will when it's trying to persuade you, it will consist of such words that will help you, like, it will sort of highlight the benefits of something, it will highlight the good side of something. So you can usually tell, like, it's very easy. Like this question, the author's purpose is usually very, very simple. It's not that hard. Okay, so the first one is persuade. The second one is inform. Informational texts give you information about a certain topic or person or place or thing. They include lots of facts. For example, textbooks, recipes, newspapers, economic reports, business reports, and encyclopedias. So, when a text is trying to give you a lot of information, right? You can recognize that. It's very easy to recognize that because there will be lots of facts, there will be lots of information. Sometimes there will be some figures, some numbers, some statistics in the passage, right? So you can, and like, secondly, you also have to think about what you are taking away from the passage, right? If you are taking away information about a topic from the passage, then you know that this was an informational passage because it gave you a lot of information about something. Okay, so this is also pretty easy. The third one is entertain. In an entertaining text, the author is telling a story, and it may include elements such as an action packed plot, fantastical elements, and sharp dialogue. These things are commonly found in fiction, where the author may employ humor, building drama, or other details to grab the reader's attention. Okay, so there's one thing you need to know whenever you come across a literary piece, right? What is a literary piece? It can be a story, it can be a poem, it can be a movie, it can be a play, it can be a TV script, TV drama script, or a movie script, anything of the sort, or a comic strip, right? Anything of the sort is always meant to entertain the reader, okay? And entertain doesn't just mean that it makes you laugh. Entertain also means that you find it interesting and you have a good time. Like when we watch movies or when we watch plays or when we read storybooks, it's not necessary that we're going to be laughing while we're watching the movie or reading the book, but it's just that it's like we find it interesting, we enjoy it, and that is what is meant by entertain. Okay, so anything that is any literary piece, whenever you come across a literary piece, just know that it is always meant to entertain. Okay, and plus, like if you still can't recognize whether it's meant to entertain or not, just look for these things that I've listed down over here: action-packed plot, fantastical elements, sharp dialogue, usually fiction. If there's a fictional passage, you know right away that it's meant to entertain. There's humor, there's some drama, or any other thing to grab the reader's attention. Okay, so all of these are meant to entertain the reader. Now we've studied the three main categories, okay? Persuade, inform, and entertain. Now, what did I tell you in the beginning? I told you that the rest of them, when we're going to study them, you will realize that each of them falls into one of these categories, okay? So let's look at the fourth one, which is explain, okay? Uh, Explain. So explain, as the name suggests, it falls under this category, inform, right? Because what is explained, let's read this explanation. When an author seeks to explain something, they wish to tell the reader how to do something or how something works. Explanatory texts are usually written in steps with clear details about how to do everything in the process. The intent of the writer is to have the reader take action to follow the steps described in the text. They may be fully or partially organized with outlines or using bulleted or numbered lists. Okay, so clearly, like, this is not very hard to understand. So I'm sure all of you know what this is. So explanatory texts basically tell you how to do something, or they explain the procedure of something. They explain the process of something. For example, how does a bee make honey, right? So supposing a passage is on how a bee makes honey, and so it's going to explain the procedure to you, and so that is an explanatory text. Okay, now it falls under the informed category because it's giving you information on something, right? Clearly it's giving you information about something, it's giving you information about a process, it's telling you how to do something, so clearly it's supposed to fall under the informed category. Let's look at the fifth one, which is describe. Descriptive text describes something using vivid and clear words to help you paint a mental picture in your head of what is happening, right? So the explanation is continued on the next slide, but let's just talk about this a little bit. So descriptive text, basically, what does it mean? To describe something, it means to describe something in such a way that, your reader can basically visualize what you're talking about, okay? And vivid and clear. Vivid means clear. Okay, so that means that you use such words that, supposing I'm describing a scenery or a landscape to my reader, okay, in my text, so I'm going to use such adjectives and such clear words that my reader will be able to visualize the scenery I'm describing for them. Okay, that's what a descriptive text looks like. So they use specific words to accomplish this, or may use unique comparisons to spark the reader's imagination. Descriptive writing focuses on invoking the five senses, often using many adjectives, and focuses on one or more things to describe in detail so that the reader has a clear image of what is happening. So what does this mean, invoking the five senses? So all of us know what the five senses are, right? There's sight, there's sound, there's touch, there's taste, and there is sound. Okay, so let me just write this down: sight, sound, sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Okay, so these are our five senses. Now, what does it mean to invoke the five senses? It means that sometimes a descriptive passage, sometimes, not sometimes, usually a descriptive passage is trying to appeal to your senses. Okay, how does it do that? It contains such details that you can actually, like, supposing if it's describing a certain smell to you, right? Supposing it's describing the smell of an apple pie to you, okay? And it's describing it in such a way that while reading it, you can actually smell the apple pie, right? I mean, you can't literally smell it, but you can sort of visualize, you sort of know what it smells like, okay? So that's what it means to invoke the five senses or to appeal to the five senses, right? It means that they use such adjectives and such words that you can actually see everything, or you can actually smell everything, or you can actually hear everything, or you can actually taste what the reader is tasting, right? So that's what it means. And that's when you know you, it's like really easy to recognize a descriptive text, right? In fact, it's very easy to recognize all of these, like it's not difficult at all. So but just know that when some a passage has a lot of adjectives, it's describing something, it's appealing to your five senses, just know that it is a descriptive passage. For example, novels, travel books, and blogs, right? So, travel books and travel blogs, what do? They describe a place to you, they describe a new city, a new country to you. They talk about a different place that they visited that you might not have visited. And so, these descriptive passages, they can fall under two categories, right? So we studied that the three main categories were persuade, inform, and entertain. Now, this descriptive passage can fall under inform and persuade, okay? Inform because it's giving you information about something, right? It's giving you very detailed information about something, about what it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like, right? So it's giving you information. And it falls under the persuade category as well, because let's talk about travel blogs and travel books, right? So they're talking about a place. Now they're basically persuading you to visit the place as well, right? That's why they're describing it in such detail, and they're describing it so nicely because they want you to visit that place. So basically, what are they doing? They're convincing you to visit that place by telling you exactly why you should visit that place, right? They're telling you what places you'll get to see there, and it's such a beautiful place, and there's such good food at that place. So basically, they're convincing you and they're persuading you to visit that place, right? So it can fall under these two categories. Now, let's talk about the sixth one, which is evaluate. To evaluate something means to consider its strengths or good points and weaknesses or bad points and then make a decision. An example of this is an essay on the advantages and disadvantages of technology. This essay will point out both the advantages and the disadvantages of technology, and then based on which one of the two seems stronger or more in number, it will conclude whether technology is beneficial or harmful for us. So these type of passages basically present an argument. Okay, what is an argument? An argument is when you present the good side of something and when you present the bad side of something, and then you make a conclusion. And what is the conclusion based on? The conclusion is based on the good and bad points that you just presented earlier, right? And the conclusion usually supports one side. Okay, like for example, if I highlight the strengths and weaknesses of something, for example, if we're talking about technology over here, I'm talking about the advantages and disadvantages of technology. And then in my conclusion, I will support one side, right? I will say, okay, so in conclusion, technology is very beneficial for us. Or I can say, in conclusion, technology is very harmful for us. So what did I do? I picked a side. And what did I pick a side based on? I based my conclusion on my points, right? If my advantages seem stronger and more in number than my disadvantages, so I'm gonna say in my conclusion that technology is very beneficial for us, right? But if it's the opposite, where my disadvantages are greater in number or stronger than my advantages, I'm gonna be like, technology is very harmful for us. So that's what an argument is. So this is just another name for argument, right? Evaluation is just the same as argument. And so this one falls under the persuade category. Okay, because it's persuading you to pick a side, right? So when a passage presents both sides of the argument and then it picks a side, it's basically persuading you to pick that side as well, right? Obviously. So clearly this one, evaluate, these passages fall under the persuade category because they're trying to convince you to pick a side. Okay, let's look at the seventh one, which is conclude. A concluding paragraph will sum up the important points of a long passage and will be stating conclusions. Now, this is also very easy to recognize when you see that a passage is like the previous one, like, I discussed in the previous point, the evaluate point, that in the conclusion of my essay, I will sort of pick a side and I will tell you why I'm picking this side, and I will give you some more evidence as to why exactly I'm picking this side. That's exactly what a concluding paragraph looks like, okay? I mean, all of you, I'm sure you guys have written essays, so you guys know what a concluding paragraph looks like. Okay, it sort of basically sums up all the main points of your report or your essay, whatever you've written. It sums up the important points of your text and it gives you a conclusion, right? So supposing if you're summing up a report, what will the conclusion contain? It will contain the main figures, right? So this is what we observed, these are the figures we noticed, and therefore this, right? So it's going to sum up the figures and the main points of the report. And if we're talking about an essay, then the concluding paragraph will, again, it will sort of like pick a side, right? If you've presented both sides of an argument, the conclusion will pick one side and tell you why it's picking the side. So it's pretty easy to spot a conclusion because you will know that it's tying the loose ends together and it's tying up the argument together and it's giving you a conclusion, and it's telling you what to think, it's telling you what to believe in, it's telling you which side to pick. Okay, so again, this one is also falling in the persuade category. Okay, this can also form in the this can also fall in the inform category because sometimes conclusions give us information, they give us facts and figures. Like for example, if we're talking about a report, the concluding paragraph will give us a lot of facts and figures and information about the report, right? So it can also fall under the inform category. Let's look at the eighth one, which is reflect. This type of a text will be reflecting upon a certain issue or idea. To reflect means to give something serious thought or consideration. These types of texts look at the subject of discussion from different viewpoints. Okay, so reflection basically means when you reflect upon something, you think really hard about it, right? You give it a lot of serious consideration and you consider it from different points of view. Okay, so when you notice that a passage is talking about a topic and it's presenting the topic from different points of view, you will know that it falls under the reflect category because it's reflecting upon a certain issue or a certain idea. Okay, let's talk about the last one, which is satirize. A satirical text is usually written to mock or make fun of something or someone or an idea. It uses humor to criticize the subject. So, because of the mention of humor, we know that this falls under the entertain category, right? Because it's meant to entertain you. So, basically, what is satire? Satire. Satire is when you are making fun of something, right? So we use this a lot in our daily lives, right? So all of us at some point have made fun of our friends or whoever, right? And we use humor to sort of mock our friends, right? You can also think of sarcasm when you think of satire, because sarcasm is pretty much the same thing when you're trying to make fun of something, but you're fun of someone, but you're using humor to do that, right? And what is our purpose? What is our purpose of mocking other people and using humor to do it? Our purpose is to entertain, right? Entertain the people around us, entertain our friends, whoever, right? So a satirical text is usually written to mock or make fun of something or someone or an idea, and it uses humor. Humor is the key word over here, humor to criticize the subject. So you can tell when you read a passage and you notice that it is criticizing someone or something or an idea, and it's sort of using humor to do it, or it's using sarcasm to do it, you know that it's a satirical text and it falls under the entertain category. So now let's talk about the second type of question that can come in your reading comprehension section. Now this is called main idea of the passage. Now this type of a question will basically say what is the main idea of this passage, or it can say the main idea of this passage is dot dot dot, and it will give you four options and you have to select the correct option. Okay, so what exactly is the main idea of a passage? The main idea is basically the topic on which the passage is based on and the message it's trying to get across. Now, this is not very difficult to identify. In fact, it is one of the easiest things to do because all of us can speak English, all of us can read English, all of us can understand English, right? So when we read a passage, when we read a paragraph, even if we cannot make a lot of sense of it, we can figure out what the passage is talking about, right? We may not understand the meanings of some words in the passage, or we may not understand one or two sentences in the passage, but that's okay. All of us are able to figure out the main idea of the passage, right? And all of us take away something from a passage, right? We take away either a lesson, or we take away some information from the passage, or we take away something, some sort of a message from the passage, and that is the main idea of the passage. Okay, so how exactly do you identify it? Now, honestly, like this is so simple that it doesn't even need a procedure, but if someone needs it, it's right here and I'm going to discuss it with you. Okay, so the first thing you do is you read the topic sentence. What is the topic sentence? The topic sentence is the first sentence of the paragraph. Okay, now usually, mostly, the topic of the, as in the subject or the main idea or whatever the passage is about, it will be mentioned in the first one or two lines of the paragraph, right? All of us know that. Of course, the author is first going to mention what he is about to talk about, and then he's going to discuss it in detail. So always read the topic sentence. The main topic of the passage is almost always mentioned in the topic sentence. If not the first sentence, then the second sentence. If not the second sentence, then the third sentence. Okay, it has to be in one of the first three sentences. Then look for words or ideas that are recurring, that is occurring again and again within the text. Okay, so what does recurring mean? Recurring means when something occurs again and again within a text, right? So supposing we are reading a passage about whales, right? So obviously the passage is going to mention whales again and again, right? And in one paragraph, it's going to mention the word whales at least 2 to 3 times, at least, right? Because it's going to be like whales look like this, and whales eat this, and whales survive under the water like this, right? So clearly it's going to keep repeating the word whales, right? So you always have to look for words or ideas that are occurring again and again within the text, right? So that is your biggest indicator that this is the main idea of the text. Okay, let's look at the third point. Look for supporting details within the text, such as facts and quotes. So facts and quotes always help you identify the point that the author is trying to make. Okay, so for example, a passage is on the benefits of waking up early. Okay, so the author can give you a lot of facts and figures on how people who wake up early are a lot healthier than the people who do not wake up early, right? The author might give you some figure like, oh, people who wake up early are maybe 20% healthier than the people who do not wake up early, right? So what is the author trying to do? He's trying to support his main point. His main point is that waking up early is very beneficial, right? So he's trying to support the main point of the passage by using evidence, right? What is the evidence? The evidence is using facts and figures, or sometimes even quotes from other people. Okay, so whenever you see supporting details, just ask yourself, what is this detail? What is this piece of evidence trying to tell me? What is this trying to trying to make me believe, right? So just think about that and you will right away get to the main idea of the passage. Let's look at the last point, which is think about what you are taking away from the text once you are done reading it. For example, if you're taking away information about how a bee makes honey, then the text was about exactly that. It's as simple as that, right? So when you read a text, like I mentioned in the beginning, all of us take away something from a text, right? No matter how short the passage is or how long the passage is, we always take away some piece of information from the passage, and that is basically the main idea of the passage, right? So we don't need to like overthink it a lot. Just think about, what am I taking away from this passage? What did I learn from this passage? What was this passage trying to teach me or tell me? And that is the main idea of the passage. So let's look at an example over here. There's a passage over here, so it's continued on the next page. Managing a job and family is not simple. Both commitments make strong demands on people and are sometimes in direct opposition to each other. Saying yes to one means saying no to the other, and stress can often result. Being realistic and creating a balance in life can help set priorities. Okay, so the main idea of the paragraph is that let's look at all the options one by one and then decide which one is the main idea. Okay, so option number A is most family responsibilities cause stress at home and at work. So this was not the main idea because nowhere did the author mention that, the stress is caused by family responsibilities, right? So let's look at the second one. Because it pays the bills, a job must take priority over other commitments. That is also not the main idea because the author did not talk about prioritizing any one of them, right? The author was talking about creating a balance between your work and your family. Let's look at the third one. It is important to have a balance between job and family responsibilities. So this does seem like the main idea, and it is the correct answer, right? Because this is exactly what the author was talking about. He was emphasizing on the importance of having a balance between your job and your family. Let's look at the last one. Because they are so important, family duties must take priority over the job. Once again, the author was not talking about prioritizing any one of them. He was talking about creating a balance. So the correct answer is option C, because it is the author's main idea. He is trying to highlight the importance of having a work-life balance. Okay, so it was that simple, right? So what did we take away from the passage? We took away the message that it's important to create a balance in your life, and that's just about it. That was the main idea of the paragraph, right? So it's just that simple. So the third one is subject of the passage. Okay, so sometimes the question will ask you what is the subject of the passage, or the subject of the passage is dot dot dot, and will give you four options, right? Now this is also super easy to identify. It's not difficult at all. Now, what is the subject of the passage? The subject of a passage is simply what the passage is about, right? So what was the previous passage, the passage that we just read about creating a work-life balance? What was it about? The subject of the passage was work-life balance, right? Or you can say work-family balance, whatever you want to call it. So that's what the subject was. Now, if a passage is on the physical description of whales, then the subject of the passage is whales, right? And if a passage is about the United Nations, then the subject is the United Nations, right? That's pretty easy to identify. You just have to figure out what the author is talking about, and that is the subject of the passage. To identify the subject of a passage, look for the one thing, idea, person, or place that is being talked about the most within the text. This means you have to look for words or ideas that are recurring within the text. Recurring, we learned, means when something occurs again and again, right? So clearly, when a word or an idea occurs again and again within a text, you know that the text is about that thing, right? For example, if a passage is about the benefits of sleeping early, the passage will mention the word sleeping early several times. Okay, so this is very simple. I don't think it requires any further discussion. Let's look at the fourth one, which is the author's attitude. Okay, so in this type of a question, you will be asked to determine the author's attitude, or how the author feels towards the topic being discussed in the passage. This can be determined by carefully considering the words used in the passage. The words used in the passage can either be negative or positive. There should be an or over here, negative or positive, right? So I've also discussed positive and negative word choice in chapter number 7, which was on completing sentences, where we talked about how we choose a word based on whether the sentence is positive or negative, right? So the same thing you have to do over here. Now, when you read a passage, of course, all of us can figure out whether the tone of the passage is negative or positive. Now, let me just write this. Author's attitude is the same as tone, right? So if they ask you what is the tone of the passage, or what is the author's attitude towards the subject of the passage, it's exactly the same thing, okay? Tone and author's attitude are exactly the same thing. Now, I was saying that when we read a passage, we can figure out what the tone of the passage is, right? It's quite simple to do that because of the word choice in the passage. If there are negative words used in the passage, we know that the tone is negative. If there are positive words being used in the passage, we know that the tone is positive, right? And then there's also a neutral tone. There are many tones, but the two basic categories are positive and negative, right? So let's see. If the author has used positive words such as excited, amazing, great, impressive, this indicates that he has a positive attitude towards the topic being discussed. Okay, so these words are just a few examples to sort of tell you what positive words are like. Okay, so there are many positive words. These are just a few examples. If the author has used negative words such as distasteful, awful, insensible, this indicates that he has a negative attitude towards the topic being discussed. The author's attitude towards the subject is also referred to as the tone of a passage. Okay, remember that. So if they ask you the author's attitude or the tone, don't get confused, it's exactly the same thing. So now I'm going to show you examples of different types of tones. So here are some examples of different tones. Now you realize that figuring out the tone of a sentence or a passage is really not that hard, right? We look at some examples and you realize it's actually pretty easy. So let's look at the first one. This place may be shabby, but since both of my children were born while we lived here, it has a special place in my heart, right? So the tone of this sentence is sentimental because of the phrase, it has a special place in my heart. It expresses tender emotions, right? So the tone of this sentence is sentimental. Let's look at the second one. This isn't the greatest apartment in the world, but it's not really that bad. Okay, so this tone is tolerant. The words not really that bad show that the writer accepts the situation while recognizing that it could be better. Okay, we can also call it neutral, that the author has a very neutral tone, right? Neither does he hate it nor does he like it. He's just sort of in the middle and he's sort of just tolerating it. Okay, let's look at the third one. If only there were some decent jobs out there, I wouldn't be reduced to living in this miserable dump. Now, because of the word miserable dump, we know that these are negative words, right? Clearly, I'm sure everyone knows that. So the tone is bitter, right? The author of this sentence is angry, he's bitter, he's like, why do I have to live here in this horrible place? The writer resents a situation. Resents is another word for hate. Okay, resent is another word for hate. So I hate something, I resent something. So it's the same. The writer resents a situation that forces him or her to live in a miserable dump. Okay, so you know that the writer is bitter. Also, I just want to add that the good thing about figuring out the tone or the author's attitude is that when you're given the question, you are also given options, right? So you don't have to come up with a word to describe the tone or to describe the author's attitude. You've been given the options and you just have to choose one of them, which is pretty easy to do. Because when you are reading a passage, you sort of already know in your mind that this is the tone of the passage and this is how the author feels. So then you're going to go to the options, and most often the word that you thought of will be there in the options, or a synonym of that word will be there, right? So it's actually pretty easy. Let's look at the fourth one. This place does need some repairs, but I'm sure the landlord will be making improvements sometime soon. So I'm sure the landlord will be making improvements sometime soon. This shows that the tone is optimistic because the writer is hoping for something to happen. The writer is expecting the apartment to be improved soon, right? He's expecting something good to happen. So the tone is optimistic. The fifth one, when we move away, we're planning to release 300 cockroaches and two mice so we can leave the place exactly as we found it. So now this tone is humorous, right? Because the writer claims to be planning a comic revenge on the landlord by returning the apartment to the terrible condition it was in when the tenants moved in, right? So the writer is sort of using humor to get his point across. Now, what is this? This is satire, right? I hope you guys realize that this is satire because the author is mocking his landlord by using humor, right? And so his tone is humorous. Let's look at the sixth one. This is the apartment we live in. It provides shelter. The tone is objective. The writer does not express feelings about the apartment. He simply states facts, right? So you'll notice that there are no feelings being expressed in these two sentences. It's simply just telling you something. It's stating a fact. It's just a statement, right? It doesn't show any emotion. It's not highlighting any feelings or emotions. So it's just, we can say it's objective. So the fifth type of question that you can get in the reading comprehension section is the passage shows, or the passage demonstrates, or the passage indicates, or the passage supports the statement that. Now, all of these are just synonyms for the same thing, right? They're synonyms and they mean the same thing. So when a question says the passage shows dot dot dot, or the passage demonstrates dot dot dot, or the passage indicates dot dot dot, or the passage supports the statement that dot dot dot, all of these will be followed by four options, out of which you have to choose the correct option. Okay, now it's really simple. These types of questions test your understanding of the passage and your ability to retell it in different words by simply restating an idea from the passage, often using different words, and asking you to determine whether the statement is supported by the passage or not. Okay, now what this means is that there will be a question statement, right? So there will be a question statement, and then there will be four options, right? And supposing option number three is the correct option, now option number three will basically be a point from the passage, right? But it will be in other words. So what this question is trying to test is that it is testing your ability to retell the passage in different words, right? So for example, if I read a passage and I want to summarize it to someone else, I want to tell them the main points of the passage. Obviously, I'm not going to use the same sentences or the same words as are used in the passage, right? Clearly, that's what summarizing means. You summarize it in your own words, right? So having that ability to retell something in your own words is what they're testing over here, right? Because the correct statement, which will be the correct option, right? The correct statement will be stated in different words, but it will mean the same thing as what has already been stated in the passage. Okay, hopefully this is not too confusing for you. In simple words, the question will state the passage shows that, or the passage demonstrates that, or the passage indicates that, followed by four options, out of which one option will be a restatement. What is a restatement? When you stated something and then you're restating it in different words. Restatement of an idea already mentioned in the passage, or a conclusion drawn from the passage. Okay, let's consider an example. For example, we read a passage about the benefits of waking up early. Okay, again, the same example that we took earlier. So we're reading a passage on the benefits of waking up early. Okay, so now the passage doesn't explicitly state. What does the word explicit mean? Clearly stated. When something is clearly stated, it is explicitly stated. So now the passage does not explicitly state that it's good to wake up early, but it's giving you all these facts and figures, and it's giving you all this information on how waking up early has benefited a lot of people, right? But clearly, like, we can use our common sense to conclude from the passage that, the main point of this passage is basically that waking up early is very beneficial, it's very important, right? So one of the options, which will be the correct statement, might be a conclusion of the passage, right? So for example, the question can be, the passage indicates that, this one, the passage indicates that, and then the correct option can be that it's beneficial to wake up early, right? And that will be the correct option. Why? Because it is a conclusion drawn from the passage. Okay, so remember, the correct option can either be a restatement of an idea already mentioned in the passage, or a conclusion drawn from the passage. So basically, what are they trying to test here? They're trying to test whether you are able to retell the passage in different words, right? Or if you are able to draw conclusions from the passage. Okay, that's about it. So let's read an example over here. Next month's census is going to be the blueprint for public policy over the next decade, and as such, it is important that as many details as possible are collected. Funds for everything from welfare payments to health and education will be apportioned and allocated on the basis of the census. The effectiveness of such programs is dependent on knowing exactly where money needs to be spent. This is why the medical community is suggesting the government collect data on five major diseases: diabetes, hypertension, obesity, hepatitis, and cardiac illness in the census. A petition filed in the Supreme Court has also asked for the census to include information about disabled people. The government and Supreme Court should follow through since collecting and analyzing information on physical and mental health issues will give it a better idea of emerging health problems and reveal if there are regional differences in the incidence of these problems, thus allowing it to distribute resources based on that data. Diabetes, in particular, is believed to be disproportionately prevalent in Pakistan, with more than 7% of the population thought to suffer from the disease. But such figures are only a rough estimation since no systemic data has been collected. The census is the best opportunity to rectify that. Now, the question is the passage demonstrates that, and then we've been given four options over here. Okay, so let's consider them one by one and see which one is correct. Let's look at the first one. Health problems are endemic to the region. What does the word endemic mean? It means when something occurs regularly. Okay, when it's endemic only refers to a disease. Okay, so when a disease occurs regularly in a specific region, that means it is endemic to the region. Okay, so this was not the main point of the passage, right? Let's look at the second one. Efficient education spending can be determined through the census. Let's look at option C. Efficient healthcare spending can be determined through the census. This is the correct answer, option C, right? Because the main point of the passage basically was that it's important to sort of take a census so that we know how much money to allocate to the healthcare sector and then how much money to allocate to the rest of the sectors, right? Now, option B is not the correct answer because even though they mentioned in the beginning, right, look over here, the first sentence, welfare payments to health and education will be apportioned and allocated on the basis of the census, right? Even though it's mentioning in the beginning that allocation of funds to the healthcare and education sectors will be done on the basis of the results of the census, the main focus of the passage is not on the education, right? It's not on the education sector, it's on the healthcare sector. So that's why the correct answer is option C. But let's look at option D. Diabetes has been eradicated in Pakistan. Now, this is absolutely incorrect because clearly it's saying diabetes in particular is believed to be disproportionately prevalent in Pakistan, with more than 7% of the population thought to suffer from the disease, which means that a lot of people in Pakistan have diabetes, okay? So the correct answer is option C, since the passage is all about the allocation of funds to the healthcare sector, will be based on next month's census. So let's look at the sixth one, which is the passage implies that, or it can be inferred from the passage that. Okay, so this is another type of like previously we studied that the question can look like the passage shows that, or demonstrates that, or indicates that. Now, similarly, this one is the passage implies that, or it can be inferred from the passage. Now, one thing you need to know is that whenever a question asks you if something can be implied or inferred or concluded or deducted from a passage, they are testing your inference skills. Okay, so some of you might know what inference is, some of you might not know exactly what it is. Okay, but I will tell you. So inference, I've written this over here. This is very important for you to know. Okay, so inference is basically evidence plus reasoning. Inference means to use the information given in the passage and combine it with your logical reasoning to reach a conclusion. Okay. Now, we do this a lot in our daily lives without even realizing it. Okay. It's not always necessary to infer something from a text. Okay. We also infer things from people's actions and their dialogues and their behavior, right? So, for example, if someone is looking very angry, right? They're not saying something, they're looking very angry, they're looking very furious, they're kicking around things, and they're being so impatient and edgy, right? You can tell from their behavior that they are angry. And what did you do? You inferred. That was inference, right? You inferred from their behavior that they are angry. Okay, they don't need to say something, they don't need to do something, just by their behavior you know that they are angry. So that's inference, right? So what does inference mean when we're reading a text? It means that you use the information given in the text, which is evidence, right? Evidence from the text, and combine it with your logical reasoning to reach a conclusion. Reasoning is your own. Okay, so inference is when you combine evidence from the text and your own reasoning to form a conclusion. That is inference. Okay, so let's look at an example. There's a sentence over here. Let's read it. Feeling excited, he packed his swimming trunks, sunglasses, and sunscreen into the suitcase and was good to go. Now, what can you infer from the following sentence? You can infer a lot of things. Number one, that he's going on a holiday. Okay, and he's going to a beach. Right, because that's where you use all of these things. Swimming trunks, sunglasses, sunscreen, all of these are used at a beach. And the suitcase indicates that he's going on a holiday, right? And then feeling excited shows that he's very happy. He's looking forward to going on his holiday. Okay, so there are a lot of things that you can infer from this sentence right away. So let's read this. We can infer that the character is getting ready to go on a holiday. The swimming trunks, sunglasses, and sunscreen are all items we'd associate with a holiday, so it's a pretty logical inference to make. He's also feeling excited, which means he is about to leave for the holiday and not packing up to leave, right? So the point is to be able to draw logical conclusions from a passage. So what are they basically trying to test? They are trying to test your logic over here. Okay, they are seeing whether you can draw logical conclusions from a passage or not, and it's actually pretty simple, like you noticed in this sentence. Without even reading this explanation over here, right? Before we even read this, I'm sure most of you inferred all of these things that I've mentioned over here. I'm sure most of you were able to infer all of these things by yourself, right? Because it's actually pretty easy. So that's what inference is, right? So they will ask you, this passage implies that, or it can be inferred from the passage that, and then they'll give you four options, out of which one will be correct and the other three will be incorrect. Okay, now it's possible that the four options are very close to each other, right? So you have to be very careful of the choice of words in each option, because they might look like the same, they might sound the same, they might you might think that they mean the same, but they're not. Okay, so one of them is correct and the other three are incorrect. So this is the end of the first video on reading comprehension. I've covered 6 topics in this video, and in part 2 of the same topic, I will cover around 5 or 6 more topics. So stay tuned for that, and I will also upload practice worksheets. All right, and yeah, that's it. I will see you in the next video.